If you're raising sheep, goats, or both, you know that good fencing isn't just important, it's a cornerstone of a healthy and flourishing flock. But with all the options out there, which one's the best? Hello shepherds, welcome back. And if you're new here, hello. This is where we talk all things sheepy. My name's Megan, and today, let's talk about the 5 different fencing systems. Rating each one for their effectiveness, comparing their costs of labor, ease of installation, how well do they keep livestock in and predators out, as well as ease and rotational grazing setups and more. So that by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which options fit your lifestyle and budget. I'll be touching on the tools that you need to make the installation easier and nuances that I found helpful in our own various setups over the years to not only save you time, preventing headaches, but also save money. I invite folks to comment their favorite systems. I'm sure you're going to miss bits, and that's what the community is about. Helping each other, learning from each other, and improving each of our systems. Though I have housed our livestock in a more tenant system, currently I have them in a Silvopasture system with a focus on implementing regenerative agriculture principles throughout our farm system. And what that means in short is that by working with nature's patterns, grazing animals under trees that not only provide shelter and shade, but also in kind the livestock fertilize the diverse grasses, forbs, rebuilding our soil and storing carbon, creating a farming system that not only improves the environment, but by becoming more resilient, and basically fixing the environmental problems rather than causing them. So let's get into it. First up, our cheapest fence line is our wattle fence or Deadhedge. I know they're 2 separate things, but I'm going to go ahead and clump them together. Think of a wattle fence as the Deadhedge's prettier cousin. There are a few versions of this style of fence, but the overall premise is still the same. You take your leader log or stick and weave our longer sticks through our leader posts. And since we mainly have this invasive honeysuckle, it was part of a movement where they tried to use them to reclaim the land, but now it's invasive. So that's why I ended up making our fence out of. If you have a bounty of willow or straight trees, that works even better. Installation is super easy, but labor intensive. If you're harvesting all the materials by hand like I have, the fence makes a pretty strong mesh that resists lambs, kids, goats, and sheep from pushing up into it and breaking through and escaping. I found that by making the top really messy, it makes it harder for the goats to figure out how to climb over it, and it requires simple tools such as a hatchet and a saw to get you started. I love how the resident birds use it for nesting too, and it's pretty effective at keeping out dogs, but not large cats. And in terms of longevity and maintenance, once it's set up, it's very easy to maintain. The logs do break down with time, and it's important to add some more sticks each year as it shifts over time, but overall it's pretty low maintenance, which I really enjoy. For rotational grazing though, it's super labor intensive, but a bonus is that it doesn't require any power and holds up to extreme weather pretty well, as well as the easy introductory tools. The main thing is it takes a lot of labor, so even though it's technically free, the cost is a lot in labor and time for this type of system. Number 2 fencing is our traditional board fencing. It's a classic choice, especially for perimeter fencing, but it comes with a trade-off. For one, installation. We need treated posts and boards, which are super costly on their own, and the installation is easier with the more expensive tools that you have. So here's one of those rare fencing that the more you spend, the easier it is to install. For tools, we have post hole diggers in several forms, with the most expensive one that's also the fastest tool for installation is a post hole digger that you can attach to your truck or tractor where you can just drill and drop your post in. Then we have our handheld post hole diggers. Some have several horsepowers which help in tearing through that rocky soil, but you need a lot of upper body strength or even a partner. Also have your hair tied back. It can be really effective. There's some downsides and positive to each one. Cost, weight, heaviness. Using these more expensive tools, it definitely saves you on time, but with the most cost-effective post hole digger is literally just kind of 2 shovels anchored together to each other. I like it, but it does take so much time to dig a post hole, especially if you have a lot of heavy rocks or heavy clay soils. But if you want to build upper body muscle, it's a great workout. Some of the pros are just how pretty these fences are. If you live in an HOA community, sometimes these are required, especially for the front of your lot. Also, if you have a blizzard or power outage, there's nothing to worry about. They tend to hold up really well to weather and don't require electricity to maintain, which is a perk. But in terms of keeping your livestock safe, they're not very effective and mainly only work in keeping the adult sheep and the most naivest of goats in. Lambs and kids definitely fit underneath each of them if you don't add any mesh or fence lining to keep those smaller animals in and dogs out. Another con is that over the years they do need regular maintenance, painting, checking for carpenter bees, and replacing bulk boards. For rotational grazing, it works a lot more like a Deadhedge fence where there's a series of paddocks and gates. It can be done, but it's a bit more labor intensive that way for the setup as well as in costs. So it's really up to you if you like it or not. But it's a really great fence as a cross fence system, or if you live in the area that has HOAs or you have concerns about aesthetic. Number 3, it's electric. Boogie woogie woogie. So I'm going to toss the many electric nettings and wires into the same category here and then discuss the nuances. Cost-wise, I'm putting this in the middle ground where the wire works much better in a forested setup than netting, and netting is super easy in a grassy pasture setup. Labor-wise, it's simple enough. Each comment of the fencing materials are lightweight, highly transportable. Most electric is just push and step to insert in and anchor, but I found in our really rocky mountainous areas, at first it was really tough to find soft enough topsoil to work with, so I found a mallet to be really helpful until we ended up building up our topsoil level, at which point I found it was really simple to just push in. I found over the years that netting works better with goats than sheep, and it's super important to train your flock to respect the fence with caution. And that's because when animals bolt, they tend to plow their way forward rather than backing up. And if they end up doing that, they can get their head stuck and tangled in there, maybe even get injured. But if they respect the electric, as the saying goes, they'll get a tiny zap and they may startle, but this startle will be by jumping backwards rather than forwards and destroying your fence. So then they learn that not only to not plow through your fence, but also there's a sort of psychological barrier of like, hey, I don't know what's going on there. I don't want to cross through there, which is really handy, but also goats are more like raptors in this regard. Once the electric is off, they just walk through, showing the sheep the way too. Through the seasons, both nets and strands have their unique problems. In the heavy snow of winter, I find I have to raise up the bottom line above the snow line and then lower again as the snow melts. And then as the grass enters its high growth period or bolting season, the electric tends to shore out on the bottom line in a 3-strand setup for the netting. Similarly, the grass can be a problem and snow can build up on the fencing itself. So there's a lot more maintenance throughout each season, but on the bonus side, it's really great for rotational grazing, rental situations, or temporary setups. Both nets and wire break down physically. The plastic breaks down pretty fast, and even within the first year, I find myself repairing breaks in the line. Even the metal wire snaps about once a year. The nets I have here are about 5 years old, and the green nets really have held up over time better than our Premier 1 white field fencing style nets. Initially, I didn't have electricity living here for an off-grid kind of situation, so I used a solar battery setup, which was great when they worked, but I found them to be really finicky with our long dark winters. And also, it's really important to check the wires because over winter, the mice and bunnies do attack them and would short our fence line by chewing through the solar panel wires. Once we got electric on the property, I ended up getting a charger, which ended up being so much more reliable. Also, a quick tip, always get the biggest one you can afford. I use a type of electric extension cord to electrify fences as I rotate the livestock around. It's pretty effective for canines, but it's more of a deterrent for larger cats and bears. One of the downsides I found with our electric netting is that it would trap bunnies in the pen with the sheep. So I'd have to go in there and kind of shoo them out, but not let the sheep out at the same time. So there's a lot of weird nuances to each fence and to each climate or habitat. For our sheep, I found that the 3-strand was perfectly fine to hold the adult sheep in. For the lambs, kids, and goats, I found the green netting with a hot line along the bottom to be the most effective, especially with some of our sheep who had learned with the electric netting that as their wool has grown in over the season after their shearing, they learned that they're pretty resistant to the electric shock. So they just dive their head underneath the ground line, rip the fence up out of the ground onto their back, tossing it aside and letting everyone out. For a more permanent and solid setup, I like metal posts with clip setups. The metal posts are super simple to install and remove with a fence puller. I use 3 strands and a clip, which work really well for trained sheep. But for lambs, I like to train them with a combination of electric net, unelectrified, and a single strand hot on the bottom. If you're training goats, it's important to make sure the top and bottom are hot in this net strand combination. Overall, if you have the means, electric fencing, both nets and 3 strands are pretty well rounded. It's adaptable, it's great great when I want to graze the sheep in odd areas. The tools are pretty simple and flexible. A wire cutter, pliers, and maybe if you end up using the metal post route, then a fence post pounder or puller works really well. Overall, it's a pretty well-rounded system that can meet several farm styles. On to number 4 fencing, metal fencing. Okay, so first off, there's a lot of confusion with woven fencing or welded wire fencing. Often, I've heard it used interchangeably with field fencing and maybe even no climbing your area. Though goats do climb it and sometimes sheep too. So let's break it down. First off, woven wire versus welded wire. Welded wire is similar to woven wire and it can be deceiving, but that's okay. So what happens with welded wire is that there's a tech weld that holds it together, and some brands are better than others. I've used it successfully in combination with 2-strand hotline as a more affordable perimeter fencing for both goats and sheep. The main thing with housing goats is that the line does need to be hot at all times, or they will go through the fence and climb up and possibly over the fence, or get tangled up onto the fence with their tiny hooves or growing horns. Depending on breeds, some goats can easily leap in a single bound over a standard fence, say adultish height. A general rule of thumb is the smaller the animal, the harder it is to contain. So woven fence is where the fence wire is woven or wrapped around each other, and it comes in a lot of forms, such as field fence, where the holes are smaller at the bottom of the fence and get larger the higher up on the fence. Then there's sheep and goat fence, where the fence holes tend to be square, and even kids or lambs tend to get their heads stuck in as their horns grow. Pulled or with a well-grown horn set, less so. There are other metal fence varieties as well, such as chain link, but the biggest difference will be mostly woven versus weld, and the next biggest difference will be length and fence height. You do save a lot of money with welded wire, but goats specifically are very hard on fences, so it definitely shortens the lifespan of the fence. Woven fence tends to last so much longer. It may sag as livestock stand on it over the years, but in terms of effectiveness, the taller the fence, the more effective it is in keeping the livestock in and predators out. Any fence that's human height or adult size and under acts more like a deterrent than predator proof. For the ultimate predator security, I recommend deer fencing, barring large cats, which tend to climb over everything. For those guys, I prefer to lock the sheep up in a solid fortress-like barn at sunset for ultimate security, but I digress. So on to the cons. It's super expensive cost-wise, and it can be a pain to install, especially the deer fencing. The nice thing though is that with a metal post, you can just pound them in, and if you don't like where they're at, you can literally just pop them out of the ground. Also, these fences are capable of lasting decades even. I really love how low maintenance they are. There's no need to worry about power outages, managing the snow or grass, and I think it works really great as a perimeter fence and a fence cross-fence type of system. For rotational grazing, it may be a little trickier due to the added expense and labor setup, but it is nice how it lasts quite a long time and doesn't need any electric to maintain itself. Personally, I found the most labor-intensive part on field fencing is tightening the fence. It really helps to have a fence puller, such as a hitch attached to a truck or an extra post to leverage and ratchet your fence and then tighten it. But overall, the tools are pretty cost-effective, making for quick work, especially when you're just in the flow of putting on the fencing. You have 2 main tools that you may end up finding at the stores that you'll end up using. I don't recall the name of one of these, just that they're all fencing tools or fencing pliers. One is good for staples and wire, and the other one is strictly wire only. So let's go ahead and move on to number 5. Our others category. So here we have living fences, stone fences or walk walls, and barbed wire. These are lesser known fencing that you may or may not be aware of. So a living fence, like a Deadhedge, depending on your area, can either be really cheap, if not free, to super costly. I started my living fence with some willow whips, which I scrounged around from the land, and they ended up getting eaten down so much. So I tried to give our willow hedgerow a fence to protect our fledgling fence, and give it time to root and grow enough to resist the flock and bounce back when they're grazing on the fence itself. It's super tricky, and between our livestock and the wildlife, I really struggled to get our living willow hedgerow established. So in terms of cost of labor, it does take a lot to set up and maintain, especially that first year of establishment. So then I decided to grow some hawthorn that's a bit more resistant to grazing. It has a lot more spikes and unpleasant to climb, but it's still quite a process to grow the hedgerow, especially from seed. So if you can bypass the process by starting with whips, it definitely helps. So it's a bit high maintenance at first especially. So the same with stone fences or walk walls. It's high labor and high cost depending on your area. I do like how they form a sort of wind barrier though, and a mini habitat for birds and bugs. So in those terms, they are pretty nice. They're solid, they can last for decades, and in the case of rock walls, maybe even centuries. In terms of cons though, they're both low effectiveness for containment until very well established. Sheep are pretty simple to contain, especially adult sheep trained to fences. They kind of mentally just check off the fence line and never really recheck the fence, which makes life easier for sure. Barbed wire in this regard is dangerous to have around both goats and sheep. So with the wool breeds, the barbed wire can actually get entangled into their wool and even cutting them. And it's not effective against the most basic of protection. So if you're thinking, should I try barbed wire? Now you know. So which should you choose? Are you off-grid or lacking or have limited access to electricity? We have a few options for you. Do you rotational graze or are not sure yet but do have a location in mind? Remember, many successful farmsteads use a combination of fencing and may end up choosing one for a perimeter and another style for cross-fencing. I'm hoping by providing you with some more details, not only on installation nuances, but from both a species perspective and also how age of livestock may affect your options and how that might impact your system. It'll help you in making the best decision for your system and saving you money and your time both in the short term and over the course of your farm. So which fence type are you considering? Drop a comment below with your setup and ask any questions. If you like this video and want to continue your sheepy educational journey, I highly recommend checking out this video where I break down exactly how to make the best sheepy shelter. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. And until next time, let's keep those animals safe and secure. Ta-ta!